An orb of light exploded in my living room a year ago, causing me to feel energy fields ever since. I had a supernatural experience a year ago that permanently activated the ability for me to feel energy fields. Can anyone elaborate on what might have happened and be still going on? My story is long, but as detailed as I could make it. It started the afternoon after I got back from a 2-week trip to the Middle East, Israel, Jordan, Turkey. I was sitting in our living room in the early afternoon drinking some tea and reading on my phone when I noticed my index finger, middle finger and thumb on my right hand started feeling like they were tingling and increasing in intensity. It felt totally unusual, but how I could best describe it was like it was being charged up. I didn't think much of it other than it was odd, but it was distracting, so I kept looking over at my hand. My wife noticed me looking at it and said, "What's wrong with your hand?" "I don't know, it just feels weird and is tingling," I said. "Let me see," she said as she walked over to where I was sitting down. Ware reached out to touch it, and before she could even reach her hand to mine, we both felt an explosive pulsing orb of energy flash between us without even yet making contact with each other. It looked to me like a white sphere expanding outwards and exploding between us. Her hand was probably 18 inches away from even touching me when this happened. She jumped back, and out loud, we both yelled out, "Whoa, what the F#K was that?" My immediate reaction was to try it again. I stood up and walked over to her where I felt instinctually drawn to hovering my fingers over the top of her chest and back several inches above it as though I was scanning across her like a metal detector. It felt as though there were strings of light connecting my fingers to her. For part of this experience, I could actually visualize them and see them, though it felt more like a type of augmented reality, and as I knew they weren't literally visible in the room. I could just see them. Extending out of my fingers, it was like tentacles of spaghetti light reaching out to her body towards points of contact that felt like areas of increased energy. There, the field of the area felt denser, with almost a magnetic resistance type of feeling, while some areas would have almost none. In the clear areas, my fingers still tingled a little, but would feel like the area was either clear of energy, weight, or had diminished magnetic resistance until I'd get closer to a denser area where the field would increase until I could almost find the densest energetic point within the area. The dense areas felt like energy continents, where the closer I moved my finger to their relative center, the stronger the pull between the tip of my finger and the cord of energy reaching out towards it was. It was almost like my finger was being tugged towards the fields, where the magnetic connection was the strongest. And once I felt the edges of one of these denser spaces, I could move my finger around the area to feel where the energy was the densest and determine where the borders of these energy continents were. My fingers very much felt like an antenna of sorts, both broadcasting to her but receiving at the same time. It was kind of like scanning through static on a radio station and hitting an audible frequency that gets clearer until you tune the station in perfectly when the audio is most clear. If I moved past where it was most in tune, I could immediately feel it. I literally could feel and hear my wife's heartbeat from about 2-3 feet or more away as electrical pulses. When I moved anywhere outside that narrow field of space, it would get quiet until I was far enough away that it would be gone. Think of the area as being 12 inches or so in diameter roughly. I could hear her heart pulsing in my head in addition to feeling it in my finger. It also sounded a little like I could feel a hum in between beats, so it would kind of sound like a lightsaber swinging when passing over her heart, then idling between swings when I pointed my fingers away. I tried to see if I could feel the energy with my other hand by pulling on where I perceived the cord of light to be, but could not feel it with my left hand, even though I could visualize it still via the scanning of my right hand I was doing. I still tried to pull on the energy with my left hand, though knowing that maybe it was still doing something, as even if I couldn't feel the field with my left hand, I could still visualize it. This went on for about 10-15 minutes, with both of us kind remarking and kind of freaking out while I'm doing it. "What is this? What's going on? How is this possible?" etc. comprised most of what was said while I was scanning her. Other than that, we were mostly speechless, just taking the experience in. My wife could feel me doing all of this the entire time and made me stop after the 10-15 minutes as she felt exhausted by it. She said it feels uncomfortable and she feels a little bit violated when I do it. Not the greatest first review of my energy abilities. LOL. After stopping, it slowly fizzled out, though I could feel residuals of the sensation for both the rest of the day and in intermittent spurts afterwards. Afterwards, we went on about our day, not even talking about it till late that evening. It's weird when I think about it because it was the craziest thing we've both ever experienced. But somehow, we were both at a loss for words. It was like stepping into some parallel reality that was too much for us to process at that moment. However, later that night, I awoke and couldn't get back to sleep. I found myself again with an irresistible urge to get up and write the experience down while it was fresh. I tried to talk myself out of it, thinking I'd still remember it in the morning. But my mind kept saying, no, write it down now. It was around 3 a.m. As soon as I finished writing the experience down, our master bedroom bathroom light slowly pulsed onto full blast brightness, then abruptly turned back off. I looked at the clock and it was 3:33 a.m. If the story couldn't get any weirder. Anyway, about 7-10 days went by where I thought about it daily. I didn't even consider trying it again, as I sort of just expected it was some freak spontaneous moment. However, I couldn't get it off my mind, and eventually decided to share the story with a family member who has Reiki experience, thinking maybe she have some useful information. She was the first one to suggest I should try it again, and told me to go to experiment with one of my wife's many crystals, who owns an online crystal boutique. My aunt said that quartz is very powerful in Reiki sessions, so later that evening I found the biggest piece of quartz I could find on our shelves. Walked over to it, reached out my hand, and immediately, once my hand was about 12 inches away, I could feel this energy field again. It freaked me out a little. I pulled my hand back like I had just touched a hot burner or something. I repeated this again for about another 5 minutes until my entire arm felt like it was pulsing with this energy all the way up to my shoulder. In the few weeks that followed, I found that this tingling would activate at random. I could feel it coming on, and once it was stimulated, I could feel the field of objects. However, after several months now of experimenting and working with it on my own, I've developed it to where I can activate it almost instantly at will. No other time has been as intense with sound and visuals as that initial Big Bang moment, but whatever got activated in me has most definitely stayed on. It's like stepping into a weird dream. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up any day and the ability will be gone, but it hasn't. Quite the contrary. For the initial months after, I was obsessed with trying to feel the field of everything. Now, if anything, it has become so normal to me, like an extra sense. When I want to do it now, I simply just have to think for a few seconds about connecting with the object and agree in my head to connect, and within a few seconds I sort of tune in and lock onto it. It doesn't come on spontaneously as much anymore now that I can turn it on, but every now and again it will. I've been doing various experiments testing different objects, usually crystals because they are usually more intense, but I've tried everyday objects too, with most having some sort of feeling to their field. My pets definitely feel like I can feel injuries, organs or areas of inflammation in particular, as well as my wife and several others who I've shared the story with. All of them felt something, with most describing it like a low-level electrical current sometimes with a magnetic feeling to it, like a 9-volt battery on your tongue, but sometimes with a magnetic force to it too. My wife calls it sparkly fingers now. I told my very skeptical sister about this for weeks before she let me try it on her hand, and within a couple of minutes she freaked out when I zapped her and immediately said to me, "Who are you?" If things couldn't get more unusual, unrelated to the investigation of this, I was at a local cemetery one time since, and immediately it spontaneously activated when I got on the property. It caught me off guard. I wasn't even thinking about it or anticipating it not being there for that purpose. However, for the next hour I was there, I could feel the energy signature of every single grave I scanned over. Each one a unique intensity, just like the unique signatures of crystals. That was the first time I realized I can use this sense from as far as 6-10 feet away. I never would have guessed it had that sort of range, and since have been able to target my wife where she can feel me scanning her from across the room from about 10 feet away. Since this happened, I have been trying to learn as much as I can about all related modalities or traditions that could shed some light on this phenomenon. I did not already have a model for this before it happened to me, so it's been a lot to catch up on, as I didn't already have any vocabulary for it. I wasn't already into Reiki, energy work, or related concepts. Even though my wife has a crystal store, I wasn't really into crystals myself beyond an aesthetic appreciation. I was always very dismissive of any metaphysical or New Age claims about them, for example. I don't have ambitions of being a healer on anything of the sorts. I don't think I would even want that responsibility. I have no grift attached to this, and it's quite literally turned my entire worldview upside down. If anything, it has been incredibly distracting, taking my focus away from many things that now feel very trivial compared to getting to the bottom of this. Ultimately, I would love if I could find a way to measure it in some way beyond my own sense of it, but also learn or understand if there is any purpose to it beyond knowing that I can simply feel the field of things. How does it feel for me? When I connect with something, I can basically feel how far out I feel the field and where its densest point is. I can almost push on the edge of that densest energy point like I'm pushing against a pillowy magnetic field. Can back my hand off just slightly and rest my hand on this field sometimes. Sometimes I also feel the rate speed of vibration, also like the 9 volts battery to tongue sensation, but at different speeds, intensities. Washing hands will diminish it, but only as long as hands are wet. Also worth noting that I seem sensitive to electronics now a little too. Sometimes using my phone makes my hand tingle when scrolling, and I can generally feel where the battery or electric components of a device are in a similar way as finding energy buildups on a person. Anyway, if you're still here, I would greatly appreciate any resources, questions, idea for experiments, or advice you have for me to cultivate, understand, and explore this further. Zagis. Follow us to see more stories in our shorts or videos.